They nicknamed her Falcon. The SEALs quickly found out the reason: Mission Chronicles. The heat at the Naval Amphibious Base in Coronado was a physical entity, a dense weight that pressed down on the grinder, the vast stretch of asphalt where dreams of becoming a Navy SEAL went to either die or be forged into something harder than steel. For the 100 or so candidates in Bud/S Class 342, it was just another day of hell. But for one of them, the heat seemed irrelevant. Senior Chief Petty Officer Mike "Boss" Morrison watched the class file out from the chow hall, his gaze lingering on a smaller figure in the back. The personnel files had flagged this one, and Morrison, a man with 20 years of service and 2 decades of combat patches, was deeply skeptical. The figure belonged to Ensign Sarah Jenkins. She was 5'6", and with a lean, athletic build that was dwarfed by the mountain of muscle around her. She had short-cropped auburn hair and eyes the color of a winter sky, a pale blue that seemed to be looking at something 1,000 yards away. Officially, she was an intelligence officer, part of a new program to embed tactical intelligence assets directly into operational platoons. The brass in Washington had a new theory, a pet project. They wanted officers who understood not just the enemy's order of battle, but the enemy's mind, gathered from signals, human intel, and satellite imagery right there on the ground. The SEALs, the tip of the spear, had a different theory. They thought it was a joke. "You see that one?" Morrison muttered to his leading petty officer, a grizzled bear of a man named Ray Kruger Sims. "The intel weenie. How long do you give her?" Kruger let out a low chuckle, his eyes scanning the formation. "First evolution. She sees one of the guys puke in the surf, she'll be calling for a medevac for emotional distress. A week, tops." The first phase of BUD/S was designed to be a psychological and physical sorter. It was a meat grinder of log PT, sand dunes, and the infamous surf torture, where candidates sat bound in the frigid Pacific tide, teeth chattering uncontrollably, while instructors screamed at them. It was a crucible that stripped away the pretense and left only the core of a man's will. They called it the hard. During the first log run, the instructors paired her with 4 larger men, a 300-pound telephone pole resting on their shoulders. The pace was brutal, a jog through the soft sand. The men began to falter, and their breathing ragged. Sarah, at the front, never broke stride. Her face was a mask of concentration, her breathing steady and controlled. When one of the men behind her stumbled, nearly going down, it was her voice, clear and calm, that cut through the chaos. "Reset! Shoulder it! Now! We're not stopping!" It wasn't a plea. It was a command. They made it to the end of the run. Then came surf torture. The class was ordered into the water, arms linked, lying on their backs as the 58-degree Pacific washed over them. The instructors paced the waterline, bellowing insults. Men began to shiver violently, their teeth chattering so hard it sounded like machine gun fire. One by one, candidates would break, uttering the words that ended their dream: "I quit." A bell would ring, a sound of abject failure. After an hour, 5 men had quit. Sarah was still there, her lips blue, her body shaking, but her pale blue eyes were wide open, staring at the stars just beginning to appear in the twilight sky. She seemed to have retreated to a place deep inside herself, a place the cold couldn't touch. Morrison saw it. He saw the quiet, indomitable core of her. He said nothing to Kruger, but a small seed of respect was planted. Weeks passed. Hell Week arrived, the culmination of first phase. For 5.5 days, candidates were allowed a maximum of 4 hours of sleep total. They were run, crawled, and swum into the ground. They conducted small boat drills, holding their inflatable boats above their heads for hours, their muscles screaming in agony. It was on night 3 that it happened. Their boat crew, Charlie, was tasked with a navigation exercise along a particularly treacherous stretch of beach, navigating by compass and pacing count. The candidate leading them, a hulking former college linebacker named O'Malley, took a wrong bearing. They ended up a mile off course, exhausted and disheartened, the precious time ticking away. The team was fracturing, blaming each other, their morale shattered. Sarah, who had been quiet, simply following orders, stepped forward. "The azimuth is 270, she said quietly to O'Malley. "We're heading inland. The checkpoint is 2 clicks south along the shoreline. If we go back now, we fail the evolution. If we cut across the tidal flat here, we can intersect the course." O'Malley, his pride bruised, snapped at her. "You think you know better? You ever navigate under stress? On no sleep? Shut up and get back in formation." Sarah didn't move. She looked at the boat, at the exhausted faces of the other 5 men. She saw the failure in their eyes. Then she did something unheard of. She turned and walked toward the tidal flat. She didn't ask permission. She just went. The crew looked at each other, then at O'Malley. One of them, a quiet Texan named Kowalski, shrugged and followed her. Then another. Within 30 seconds, O'Malley was alone with the boat. He had no choice but to follow. Sarah led them at a steady jog across the soft, treacherous mud of the tidal flat, her eyes scanning the ground for soft spots, her path sinuous but sure. She moved with a fluid grace that belied her exhaustion. In 45 minutes, they popped out exactly 200 meters from the checkpoint, right on the designated bearing. And an instructor, watching from the darkness, made a note on his clipboard. The crew made the checkpoint with 10 minutes to spare. They passed the evolution. They didn't fail. The next morning, as the survivors of Hell Week stumbled into the chow hall for a hot meal, Morrison and Kruger watched them. Kowalski and the others from Charlie Crew sat with Sarah, not as a curiosity, but as a teammate. They were laughing, a hollow, exhausted sound, but laughter nonetheless. She was one of them. Kruger took a long sip of his coffee. "She's got something, boss. I don't know what it is. Spatial awareness? An inner compass? She found that checkpoint in the dark, through the mud, without a map. Just from memory." Morrison nodded slowly. "It's not a compass, Ray. It's a computer. She's processing everything. Wind, tide, stars, the way the mud feels. It's like she sees the world in a different resolution than we do." He remembered the report from the intelligence school in Dam Neck, Virginia. The instructors there had used one word to describe her: exceptional. Morrison was beginning to understand why. She wasn't just surviving. She was operating. The real reason for her presence was slowly coming into focus, but her full potential, the reason for the nickname they would soon give her, was still hidden, waiting for a real crisis to reveal itself. The brutal crucible of BUD/S was just the entry fee. After graduating with the remnants of Class 342, Ensign Sarah Jenkins, now officially a naval special warfare operator, moved with her new team to the next level: SEAL Qualification Training, SQT, and then direct-to-platoon integration. She was assigned to SEAL Team 7 Delta Platoon, and a group of 16 men led by the man who had first doubted her, Lieutenant Commander Mike Morrison. The skepticism in the platoon was a living thing, a silent beast that followed her everywhere. She was the intel weenie, the pencil pusher, the Washington plant. They didn't say it to her face, not after seeing her survive Hell Week, but she felt it in the way conversations would stop when she approached, in the way they'd simplify tactical briefings as if explaining to a child. Morrison did nothing to stop it. He was old school. Respect couldn't be given. It had to be taken. And he was curious to see how she would take it. The training cycle ramped up. They moved from Coronado to the barren, dusty landscapes of the Naval Air Weapons Station China Lake in the Mojave Desert. The mission was close quarters combat, CQC, and dynamic assault drills on a simulated insurgent compound. The Delta Platoon Sergeant, Senior Chief Sims, ran the drills with a sadistic perfectionism. He'd throw in simulated casualties, IED blasts, and civilian role players to test their decision-making under fire. During one complex scenario, the platoon was assaulting a two-story structure. The breach went wrong. The point man, Kowalski, took a simulated round to the leg and went down in the fatal funnel, the open doorway, blocking entry for the rest of the team. Gunfire, simulated with blanks, was pouring from the windows. Confusion reigned. The assault element was pinned. The team leader, a lieutenant named Harris, was screaming for a report, his voice tight with panic in the comms. In the middle of the chaos, Sarah wasn't screaming. She was 100 meters back, kneeling behind a low wall, a tablet computer in her hands. She wasn't a breacher or an assaulter. Her job was to overwatch, to provide real-time intel. She was linked to a small quadcopter buzzing silently 1,000 feet above the compound. On her screen, she saw not just the front door, but the thermal signatures of 3 insurgents moving to a side window on the north wall, preparing to flank the stalled assault team. She also saw a secondary signature in a room adjacent to the main fight, a cluster of small, cooler heat sources. Civilians, probably a family, huddled in a corner. While Harris yelled for a status report, Sarah's calm, clear voice cut through the radio net. Delta. Actual. This is Falcon. 3 tangos, north wall window, preparing to flank. I also have 4 possible non-combatants. The ground floor east room. Suggest you suppress north wall and shift assault to the east breach point to avoid collateral. The radio went silent for a beat. Harris, focused on his own immediate crisis, hadn't seen the bigger picture. Morrison, observing from a rooftop, keyed his mic. Acknowledged, Falcon. Delta 6, follow Falcon's recommendation. Now. The platoon adjusted. The support by fire team laid down a curtain of suppressing fire on the north wall. The assault element, using the cover, hauled the wounded Kowalski out of the doorway and punched through the east wall breach point. They cleared the building, securing the civilians and neutralizing the insurgents. The exercise was a success. Back in the makeshift command tent, Morrison played back the drone footage. He saw what Sarah had seen in real time. And he saw the deadly flanking maneuver developing. He saw the civilians, and he heard her voice again, calm, precise, and utterly certain. Falcon, he muttered to himself. It was the call sign the comms officer had assigned her from a random list, but it fit. From her perch, unseen in the sky, she had seen the whole battlefield. She had seen the threat and the danger to the innocents, and she had directed the hunters to their prey with unerring accuracy. Later that evening, around a makeshift campfire of burning pallets, the men were quieter than usual. Kowalski, his leg fine but for a massive bruise from the wound, walked over to where Sarah sat, studying a map under a red lens flashlight. He sat down heavily next to her. He didn't say anything for a long time. Then, he spoke. You saved my ass today, he said. His voice gruff with embarrassment. I was dead in that doorway. If those tangos had gotten to that window, they'd have hosed the whole stack. He offered her a lukewarm bottle of water. Sarah looked up from her map, her pale eyes reflecting the red glow of the light. She took the water. You'd have done the same for me, she said. It wasn't a question, it was a statement of fact. Kowalski nodded. Yeah, I would have. He paused. I wouldn't have seen the civilians, though. I was locked on the door. I would have called in an airstrike on that whole room. would have been a disaster. He looked at her, his gaze level. Where'd you learn to see like that? Sarah took a sip of water, considering the question. My dad was a game warden in Montana, she said finally. He'd take me up in his Cessna when I was a kid. We'd fly for hours over the wilderness. He taught me to look for the anomalies, the deer track that doesn't fit, the broken branch, the campfire smoke where there shouldn't be any. He said anyone can see the forest. A good hunter sees the spaces between the trees and what's moving in them. She tapped her temple. I just do it with data now. Kowalski smiled, a genuine warm smile. He stood up and walked back to the fire. A few minutes later, Sarah heard her new call sign being tossed around the group. It wasn't an insult. Hey, Falcon, you see the chow line? Falcon, you got a visual on my dip can? It was an acceptance. The nickname had been given, and now they were testing it, making it their own. But they had only seen a glimpse. They hadn't yet seen the Falcon stoop on a real target, in a real fight, and where the consequences were written not in simulation data, but in blood. That moment was coming. The call came at 0300. It ripped the platoon from a restless sleep in their forward operating base, a dust-choked compound in the Helmand River Valley of Afghanistan. The target was a high-value individual, a Taliban facilitator known as the Tailor, who moved between safe houses in the village of Spin Gar. The initial intelligence, from a human source, was that he was in a specific compound for one night only. The mission was a classic night raid. Fast rope from 2 MH-60 Blackhawks, clear the compound, grab the target, and extract. Simple. Direct. The kind of mission SEALs lived for. But Sarah, hunched over her bank of screens in the Joint Operations Center, wasn't satisfied. The human intel was good, but it was 2 hours old. She had been cross-referencing everything. Satellite imagery, drone feeds, signals intercepts from the National Security Agency. A pattern was starting to emerge, a faint signal in the noise. There had been a spike in local cell phone traffic near a compound 400 meters south of the primary target. The voices were different, more cautious. Then a second data point. A satellite image from 40 minutes prior showed a vehicle, a dark pickup truck, matching the description of the Tailor's known transport, parked not at the main target compound, but behind a mud brick building near the secondary location. She flagged down Morrison, who was doing his final kit check, his face smeared with green and black camouflage paint. Sir, she said, her voice low, I think the primary is a dry hole. The target pattern suggests he's shifted. Look at this. She showed him her overlay, the two images side by side. Morrison stared at the screens, the seconds ticking by. The helicopters were already spinning up on the pad. Changing a target at this stage was almost unheard of. It injected chaos and risk. The men were mentally prepped for Compound A, not Compound B. You sure about this, Falcon? He asked, his voice a low growl. If you're wrong, we waste the entire night and the Tailor slips away. My men's lives are on the line here. Sarah met his gaze. I'm not wrong, Senior Chief. The pattern is clear. He's a ghost. But ghosts leave footprints in the data. He's there. It was the same certainty she'd had on the tidal flat in Coronado. Morrison made a split-second decision that defined his leadership. He trusted his asset, and he got on the radio to the Black Hawk flight lead and the mission commander. Red Crown, this is Delta Actual. Abort primary. I say again, abort primary. New target is Compound Hotel 29er. Confirm. The response was a crackle of confusion, then confirmation. The mission commander, a risk-taker himself, approved the change. The birds shifted course. The assault on Compound Hotel 29er was a textbook success. The SEALs fast roped onto the correct roof, their movements a blur of coordinated violence. They met stiff resistance. guards with AK-47s who were alert and waiting, not sleepy and surprised. The firefight was intense, a furious minute of controlled bursts and room clearing. 3 Taliban fighters were killed in the initial breach. They found the tailor hiding in a basement bunker, surrounded by communication equipment and ledgers full of names. He was captured without a shot fired in his room. As they zip-tied his hands and prepared for extraction, Morrison took a moment to look at the compound they had just cleared. It was a fortress compared to the primary target. It had prepared fighting positions, multiple exits, and a clear line of sight to the primary compound. If they had hit the first target, the tailor would have watched the helicopters from his hiding spot, laughed, and then slipped away into the mountains while the SEALs were left holding an empty bag. Or worse, they would have walked into an ambush on their way out. Back at the FOB, the platoon was buzzing with the success of the raid. The tailor was in the interrogation room, and early reports indicated he was talking. The mission commander came down personally to congratulate the platoon. "That was some damn fine on-the-ground intel work, Morrison," he said, clapping him on the shoulder. "Your JTAC called in the change?" Morrison shook his head, a rare smile cracking his weathered face. "Not the JTAC, sir. It was my intel officer, Ensign Jenkins. She saw the pattern when no one else could." The commander looked over at Sarah, who was quietly backing up her data, oblivious to the conversation. He nodded slowly. "The one they call Falcon?" "Yes, sir," Morrison said. "That's the one." The nickname had stuck, but now it carried a new weight. It wasn't just about her role with the drone. It was about her ability to see through the walls, through the lies, through the fog of war. She had become their most potent weapon, and a set of eyes that could pierce the darkness and find the truth. The debriefing was held in a reinforced Conex box that served as the command center. Sarah stood before the platoon and the mission commander, a laser pointer in her hand, projecting her data onto a whiteboard. She walked them through her analysis, the cross-referencing of signals, the satellite imagery, the heat signatures. She spoke in clear, concise sentences, using no jargon, painting a picture that everyone in the room could understand. Kowalski, now her staunchest ally, leaned over to the new guy, a replacement operator named Jones. "You see her in BUD/S?" he whispered. "She was just surviving. Now look at her. She's hunting. She sees everything." The men in Delta Platoon no longer saw an outsider. They saw a teammate, a guardian. They saw the Falcon, circling high above, keeping them safe. And in the dangerous months that followed, during countless patrols and firefights, she would prove her worth again and again, her uncanny ability to anticipate the enemy's next move becoming the stuff of quiet legend within the team. She was no longer just Ensign Jenkins. She was Falcon, the woman with the eyes of a hawk and the cold, calculated heart of a predator. The deployment was entering its final month. The platoon had been exceptionally effective, their success rate soaring thanks to Sarah's predictive analysis. They had disrupted 3 major IED networks and captured or killed a dozen mid-level Taliban commanders. The enemy was feeling the pressure, and they were getting desperate. The intelligence chatter was spiking with words like retaliation and big loss. The Americans, the chatter said, had a all-seeing eye. They didn't understand how they were being found, but they knew they were being hunted. Delta Platoon was tasked with a daylight patrol through the village of Marja, a known insurgent stronghold. The mission was show of force, a presence patrol to demonstrate that the Afghan government, with American backing, controlled the area. Morrison hated daylight patrols. They were predictable, vulnerable. But the command wanted visibility. Before they stepped off, Sarah pulled Morrison aside. She had been monitoring the local cell towers. "Sir, the pattern is wrong," she said, her brow furrowed. Civilian traffic is down 80% in the market district. But there's a steady, low-level signal coming from the rooftops of the southern approach. Too regular. Too coordinated. It feels like a trigger. Morrison trusted her implicitly now. He radioed the company commander, suggesting a route change, a loop through the northern agricultural area to approach the village from a different axis. The battalion commander, a man who believed in the sanctity of planned routes, denied the request. "Stick to the plan, Delta. We need a show of force on Main Street." Morrison cursed under his breath. He looked at his men, 14 of them, plus their Afghan commandos. Then he looked at Sarah. "Falcon, you're with the main element today. Stick close to me and keep your eyes open." The patrol moved out, a long single-file line of camouflaged men, their boots kicking up the fine, pale dust of the Afghan countryside. They entered the southern outskirts of Marja, a maze of high mud compound walls and narrow alleyways. And the silence was the first warning. No children running, no merchants calling out. The market stalls were empty. It was a ghost town. Sarah walked third in line, her head on a swivel, but her mind was on her handheld device, a ruggedized tablet that pulled in feeds from a small hand-launched drone buzzing overhead. On her screen, she saw the rooftops, and she saw the men. They were lying prone, hidden behind parapets. They had RPGs. They were in a perfect L-shaped ambush, designed to catch the patrol in a kill zone where the main street narrowed between two high walls. Her blood ran cold. "Contact front ambush! Rooftops left and right now!" she screamed, her voice ripping through the radio net a full 2 seconds before the first RPG whooshed down. The world erupted, and the whoosh of rocket-propelled grenades was followed by the deafening crump of impact. One round slammed into the wall 5 meters ahead of Morrison, showering him with dust and shrapnel that tore into his leg. He went down hard. Another round hit the middle of the column. "Ambush! Ambush!" The cries were everywhere. The patrol was pinned, caught in the exact kill zone Sarah had predicted. The enemy fire was devastatingly accurate, a torrent of PKM machine gun fire and AK-47s from at least 10 different positions. The Afghan commandos at the front of the line were caught in the open. 2 went down immediately. Chaos reigned. The platoon was being cut to pieces. Men were scrambling for cover, returning fire, but they were shooting blind, unable to see the concealed enemy positions. The L-shaped ambush was perfectly executed. Say it was a trap, and they were deep inside it. Morrison, bleeding heavily from his leg, tried to rise, but another burst of machine gun fire stitched the ground inches from his head, forcing him flat. "Suppressing fire! Where are they? Someone spot for us!" he roared into the radio, his voice a mixture of pain and fury. But there was no one to spot. The point man was down. The assistant patrol leader was pinned behind a small berm 50 meters back. The enemy had the high ground and complete visibility. They were slaughtering them. And then Sarah Jenkins moved. While every other instinct screamed to stay down to hug the dirt, she did the opposite. She saw her team dying, she saw Morrison bleeding, and she saw, with the clarity that had defined her entire life, that the only way out was through, and the only way to see was from above. See, she spotted a rickety wooden ladder leaning against the inside wall of the compound she was pressed against. It led to the roof. Without a second's hesitation, she slung her rifle, grabbed the ladder, and climbed. Bullets whizzed past her, smacking into the mud brick, sending chips of dried clay into her face. She ignored them. She reached the rooftop and scrambled, crawling on her belly to the edge. She was now exposed to the entire enemy firing line. But she could see. She could see everything. From her perch, the enemy positions were laid out before her like a diagram. She saw the muzzle flashes, the dark shapes of the insurgents behind their rooftop parapets. She pulled out her handheld laser designator, a device no bigger than a large smartphone, and powered it up. Her fingers flew across the screen. Activating the laser and linking it to the coordinates of the orbiting gunship she knew was overhead, a deadly AC-130 Spectre, the Angel of Death, loitering 10,000 feet above, waiting for a target. "Any station?" "This is Falcon," she said, her voice the calmest thing on the entire battlefield. Her breathing was steady. Her hands were still. "I have multiple targets in the open rooftop positions. Marking with laser. Request immediate fire support. Danger close." The radio crackled. "Falcon, this is Spectre 71. We have your laser. Good spot. Count 15 individual heat signatures on rooftops. Wait 1. We are cleared hot. Danger close. You need to get down. Now." "I can't get down," she said, flatly. "I'm the spotter. Take the shot." On the ground, Kowalski saw her. He saw her silhouette on the rooftop. So a perfect target against the pale sky. "Falcon, get down!" he screamed, his voice raw with terror. But she didn't move. The first 105mm round from the Spectre's howitzer sounded like the sky itself was tearing apart. It slammed into the rooftop directly across the street, obliterating the enemy position in a ball of orange flame and concrete dust. The shockwave was immense, a physical force that punched Sarah in the chest and made her ears ring. She held her position, her laser unwavering. "Target 1 destroyed," she said. "Shifting to next target north-northwest, marking now." Another round. Another hit. The enemy fire began to falter as the insurgents realized they were being hunted by a god in the sky. They tried to run, to scramble down from their roofs. But the Falcon saw them all. While she directed the gunship's fire with chilling precision, walking the explosions across the rooftops, methodically erasing each ambush position. The 40mm Bofors guns joined in, a deadly chain of fire that chewed up the walls and silenced the machine guns. In under 3 minutes, it was over. The silence that followed was heavier than the gunfire. The air was thick with dust and the acrid smell of cordite. Sarah slowly lowered the designator. Her arms were shaking now, the adrenaline finally hitting her system. She looked down from the rooftop. The patrol was safe. Men were moving, tending to the wounded. Morrison, his leg tourniqueted by a medic, was staring up at her, his face a mixture of awe and disbelief. She climbed down the ladder, her legs feeling like rubber. As her boots hit the ground, Kowalski ran to her, his face streaked with dust and tears. He grabbed her, pulling her into a crushing embrace. "You crazy. You beautiful crazy. You saved us all. You saved us all." Morrison, propped against a wall, waved her over. He looked at her, at the young woman he had once dismissed as an intel weenie. He saw the dust, the blood from a small cut on her cheek, and the calm, winter sky eyes that had just directed death from above while standing in the middle of a firestorm. He didn't have the words for a long speech. He just reached out and gripped her forearm, a warrior's grip. "Falcon," he said, his voice hoarse, "I'm glad you're on our side." The medevac birds came in hot, lifting out the wounded, including Morrison. The rest of the platoon, shaken but alive, made the long walk back to the FOB. They walked in a different formation now, a tighter one. Sarah Jenkins, the Falcon, walked in the middle. No one suggested otherwise. The nickname was no longer just a description of her job. It was a title of honor earned in the air over the battlefield, with the lives of her teammates as the price of admission. She had looked into the abyss, and instead of blinking, she had called down fire.